Hi, I'm Andy Bridden from PA Consulting. I'm delighted to be here at the IoTSF virtual conference. So just a little bit about my background. I spent 30 years working for a major telecommunications provider, delivering a range of innovative projects, including a major rollout of RFID for 2 different retailers, and then moving to a range of IoT projects across a number of sectors, including utilities, transport and logistics, and housing associations. Whilst at PA, I focused on securing Internet of Things, and my talk today is on the Internet of Medical Things, or IoMT, which is an increasingly important industry. I'm going to look at how we secure medical devices in an increasingly connected world. IoT is certainly growing at an explosive rate, with an estimated 75.4 billion connected devices predicted by 2025. However, there's quite a bit of evidence that this growth is being dampened by concerns over security, and nearly 20% of organisations have observed one form of IoT-based attack over the last 3 years. And whilst IoT is being adopted across a range of industries, we're going to focus on healthcare and life sciences. And of course, when it comes to healthcare, one of the concerns with IoT and those devices is there is the opportunity for patient harm or indeed sensitive patient data to be leaked. So there's a particular importance to security concerns within the Internet of Medical Things. If we look at some of the key trends within medical device development at the moment, we're finding that traditional medical device manufacturers are starting to have to compete with mass market personal health care offerings, but both are converging to form the Internet of Medical Things. So existing device manufacturers are adding capability to their drug delivery and monitoring equipment, which needs new features driven by data that need network and cloud connectivity. The personal mass market healthcare systems are increasingly acquiring sophisticated capabilities that move them much towards being a traditional medical device. And there are a whole range of innovative startups that are bringing new devices to mass market, so competing with the larger medical device manufacturers. And increasingly, there are a number of initiatives in crowdsourced and open source where frustrated patients are beginning to develop their own systems, such as the artificial pancreas, by connecting existing medical devices together using open source. All of this, though, is underpinned by big data analysis based on machine learning, cloud infrastructures, and this all supports the background that's needed for this particular convergence. Connecting medical devices empower new service models driven by data. And as the Internet of Medical Things grows, this will expand to cover each phase of the care lifecycle. So awareness, prevention, diagnosis, treatment and management. And we're seeing connected medical devices sit across each of these phases of the life cycle. So in awareness, we have exercise and activity monitors and trackers, educational mobile apps, for example. In prevention, there are a range of devices that look at behavioural analysis and preventative care. When it comes to diagnosis, there's a range of AI-driven diagnosis apps, virtual GP, medical imaging that can be used. Treatment, so management of chronic disease, monitoring of patient compliance, and critically delivering care that would otherwise happen in a hospital or GP environment within a home-based environment. So these connected medical devices do enable that. And then when it comes to management as well, so management of chronic disease, post-treatment monitoring and surveillance monitoring, these connected medical devices can provide data back to clinicians that again allow people to recover at home or manage their disease at home with fewer visits to the hospital or the healthcare provider. So that's one of the key benefits of connected medical devices. Security incidents are expected to grow as the Internet of Medical Things market accelerates. So all of this connectivity and complex software features being added to the devices increases routes for cyber attackers to attack the device and exploit a range of vulnerabilities that could be found. Fortunately, to date, the number of incidents of patient harm has been very low, although there was a recent case in Germany in a hospital where a patient's death was attributed to a ransomware attack. In terms of medical devices, if we just look at some of the exploits and vulnerabilities that have been found, in 2019, a defibrillator was found to have a telemetry protocol flaw, and that would allow someone in close proximity to the patient to actually send commands to that particular device. In 2016, an insulin pump was found to have 3 vulnerabilities that could be remotely exploited over the network. The picture archiving and communication system security researchers found a range of vulnerabilities within both commercial and open source PAC systems. And in 2014, an anesthesia delivery system was found to have a range of serious bugs and flaws which could be exploited through the USB port on that particular device. Cybersecurity risks for medical devices are not yet well understood and mitigated. Risk management and mitigation for traditional non-connected devices is well understood, and the safety critical requirements of those devices are underpinned and enforced at regulatory level. Manufacturers have developed a robust appreciation for risk mitigation and management using established standards, best practices, and the legislative and regulatory requirements are in place. However, when it comes to the cybersecurity of connected medical devices, that's at an early stage of maturity. And many of these manufacturers working with Internet of Medical Things need expertise which is outside of their traditional capability. So hardware and software security, including encryption and key management, cloud services that are used to store the data, developing connected medical devices that might use Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, the privacy of data across that complex ecosystem and how to protect it, and then doing secure networking and updating the device through its entire life cycle. So the regulatory environment for medical devices is challenging and complex, and there are layers of regulation and guidance which apply for medical device cybersecurity, and these vary by region, so EU, US and so on. And I've highlighted some of the key standards here which are particularly informative. UL 2900 is a new standard for medical device cybersecurity, and is a good effort at pulling everything together, for example, that's needed to meet the requirements of the FDA. In the EU market, the Medical Device Coordination Group document, again, is a good summary of pulling together what's needed to meet the medical device regulation in the UK. And in the US, there's a range of FDA guidance, which is actually quite extensive, which covers both pre and post-market management of the cybersecurity of medical devices. And there's also a range of guidance documents for risk management and post-market risk management for medical device manufacturers and cybersecurity. So if we explore what's happening in the EU, there are 2 pieces of new regulation within the EU, the medical device regulation and the IVDR, the intravenous device regulation. And within these new regulations, which apply to medical devices that will come to market over the coming years, they do address cybersecurity, and they put the onus on the device manufacturer to do so. And I've pulled together from the MDR here some of the main clauses within the regulation which cover cybersecurity. But I think there's a number of things that are worth observing here. So firstly, there isn't an explicit section on cybersecurity or security within the regulation. So buried within the clauses of the regulation are a number of aspects which address cybersecurity. So within the product development lifecycle, for example, you need to look at risk management, including information security, verification and validation, and that must be taken into accordance with state of the art. Similarly, there must be protection against unauthorized access of the device necessary to run the software that's intended as needed. And there must be measures in place which cope, for example, with a data security breach. And similarly, detailed risk assessment and management processes must apply. Those must be traceable. But I think as you can see from the clauses that I've highlighted here, they're at a very, very high level in terms of what they cover. So there is an awful lot left to the medical device manufacturer to work out exactly how to meet the requirements of the medical device regulation, and there's a high degree of a lack of clarity around how to do that. So if we move to the US market now, the FDA puts the prime responsibility for cybersecurity with the device manufacturer, and the FDA works with other government agencies to increase the security of medical devices and the critical infrastructure associated with them. So both the medical device manufacturer and the healthcare delivery organisations are responsible for cybersecurity. It would be fair to say that the cybersecurity for connected medical devices is at an early stage of maturity, but there is a wide range of guidance that's been produced by the FDA, but this is not regulation at this stage. Whilst that may be the case, it's true that the FDA expect you to comply with the guidance and follow it quite strictly. So FDA guidance looks at pre-market testing of medical devices. So depending on the nature of cybersecurity risk, it'll either be a tier 1 or a tier 2 device. So a tier 1 device has a higher level of cybersecurity risk, and that's where a cybersecurity incident could result in patient harm to one or more patients, or tier 2 where the standard cybersecurity risk. So in essence, where patient harm could not result from a cybersecurity incident. The FDA also address the use of commercial off-the-shelf software within device manufacturers' products. And again, there's various guidance on the use of COTS software and SOUP that device manufacturers have to take on board. The FDA also continually monitor for vulnerabilities that have been found in medical devices. And as recently as October 2019, they flagged the Urgent 11 vulnerabilities that were found in the IPnet. So device manufacturers are required to assess that risk and take remedial action. When it comes to post-market surveillance, the FDA has a range of guidance in place to look at coordinated vulnerability disclosure, for example, device updates and recall, and they also recommend monitoring of a range of cybersecurity sources for vulnerabilities, so action can be taken and any potential vulnerability can be reported to the FDA. So I'm going to spend some time on the key differences in how you go about cybersecurity risk analysis for a medical device. So obviously a medical device does have the capability to cause patient harm. So the safety risk for a medical device is covered by the ISO 14971 standard. And that looks at potential assessments of risk associated with failure modes within the device itself and what implications they have for patient harm. When it comes to cybersecurity risk analysis, you can adopt a more traditional approach, so looking at threats, assets, vulnerabilities, and then doing risk analysis from that. But of course, there is an overlap between those two in terms of safety and security risk. So you could have a security risk with a safety impact, in which case the two risk management processes need to have some interplay between them. So if there is a safety risk with a cybersecurity impact, for example, that needs to be taken into account, and vice versa. So if a cybersecurity risk could have a safety impact, which might cause patient harm, then that has to feed into the safety risk assessment under ISO 14971. Because safety is paramount, you might find that there's an equivalent of some sort of break glass capability when it comes to a medical device. So you can't have a password or security feature getting in the way of delivering healthcare to a patient, for example, particularly in an emergency. Similarly, all medical devices go through extensive human factors trials and tests, and this is to make sure the device is usable without having to refer to the manual continually. And part of that process is also looking at reasonably foreseeable misuse of the device, so someone trying to circumvent security controls or any other form of misuse of the device, which could also result in some sort of patient harm or safety risk. And I've referenced here TIR 57, so Principles for Medical Device Security Risk Management. And that's a very good guidance document that explains how to run your safety risk assessment under ISO 14971 with a cybersecurity risk analysis and how to pull those two forms of analysis together and the interplay between the two processes. So I'm going to look at how you develop cybersecurity requirements for a medical device. So medical device manufacturers have a stage-gated process which moves from design inputs to design outputs through to verification and validation. So design inputs is very much around gathering all the requirements, and an essential part of that is having design traceability. Design outputs is where the products are actually produced, so code, hardware, designs and so on are pulled together, and verification and validation is where those are tested against the requirements. So there will be a range of standards, guidance and regulation that will apply depending on the target markets for the particular medical device. And one of the challenges that you'll face in pulling together cybersecurity requirements is that some standards will have extensive references to cybersecurity and some may only have one or two clauses within them. But all of these have to be assimilated and pulled together. And similarly, there'll be overlap between the various standards as well in terms of what they ask for. So at the moment, there is no one single standard that you can go to that provides coverage as to how to meet the requirements, for example, of the FDA or the EU. So you do have to pull together these requirements, map them and align them to form a unified set of requirements that go into your design inputs. So that's quite a complicated task. Bearing in mind that there could be 20 or 30 standards, pieces of guidance and regulation that apply to your particular device, depending on where you're going to launch. Connected medical devices are very much part of the digital transformation agenda. So delivering healthcare supported by data driven from the connected device. But there are a number of enablers that will really need to be in place for this transformation to accelerate. So we've covered aspects of cybersecurity and vulnerabilities within these medical devices, which is a complex area to tackle. And one of the things that really doesn't help here is the lack of a unified standard or sets of guidance which can support you in developing a connected medical device. So I would expect that one or two of these standards will start to gain more traction and industry acceptance. UL 2900, the two different parts of that, I think, could well be part of that, and similarly efforts within the EU around the medical device coordination group and so the documentation they're producing would make it easier to meet the medical device regulations within the EU. Another key part of the challenge is that medical device manufacturers will have to transform their businesses to support the Internet of Medical Things. So as we touched on earlier, there's a whole range of new skills that will have to be acquired, particularly around medical device development, connected medical device development, cybersecurity, handling the post-market aspects of having a digital device out in the market, so software updates, product recalls, vulnerability reporting and so on. And a lot of that requires product management capability and functions for a digital healthcare device, which don't necessarily exist in many traditional medical device manufacturers at the moment. So there's a whole range of transformation that will be needed to enable these devices to be successful in the future. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention and interest in the presentation, and I'd now like to open the floor to any questions.